The charlatan mystics promise that spiritual awakening brings peace, serenity, and inner light. They lie. Or more charitably, they have never genuinely awakened and mistake philosophical entertainment for metaphysical transformation. True spiritual awakening is dangerous not because it leads to madness, though that risk exists, but because it systematically destroys every comfortable illusion that makes ordinary existence tolerable. The awakened person perceives what society depends upon everyone not perceiving, that our pursuits are futile, our individuality illusory, our suffering purposeless. This knowledge cannot be unlearned, cannot be comfortably integrated into bourgeois existence, cannot be shared without provoking hostility or ridicule. Society does not fear the spiritually awakened because they are wrong. It fears them because they are right. Like the child in the fable who announces the emperor wears no clothes, the awakened individual threatens the collective delusion upon which social order rests. Their very existence poses an intolerable question. What if everything we pursue so desperately, wealth, status, romantic love, meaningful achievement, serves only the blind perpetuation of a cosmic force that cares nothing for our happiness? I have observed this fear in Frankfurt streets, in Berlin's university halls, in the eyes of comfortable men confronted with uncomfortable truth. This work explains why society must suppress genuine awakening and how the rare individual navigates this suppression without being destroyed by it. You believe yourself dissatisfied with your circumstances, perhaps imagining different employment, another companion. Greater wealth would satisfy. This is ordinary discontent, the common condition of men who blame external factors for internal emptiness. But for certain souls, a different question emerges. Not why am I unsatisfied, but why does satisfaction never endure? This is the fatal question. Once genuinely asked as metaphysical inquiry rather than rhetorical complaint, awakening begins irreversibly. I observed this in Kaufmann, a Hamburg merchant who achieved every goal. Wealth, position, family, all acquired. Yet one evening, staring at his accounting books, he asked with genuine bewilderment, what was this all for? That question shattered his comfortable existence. He continued his business, but as one performing a role he no longer believed in. The distinction matters absolutely. Ordinary dissatisfaction seeks new objects of desire. Genuine awakening questions desire itself. The former imagines satisfaction possible with different circumstances. The latter recognizes that satisfaction, by nature, cannot endure. If you experience persistent dissatisfaction despite achievement, if conventional explanations ring hollow, if you increasingly perceive others living within illusions you can no longer share, awakening has begun. This is not celebration, but recognition of danger. You have crossed a threshold from which retreat grows daily more difficult. Spiritual awakening destroys illusions that make ordinary existence tolerable. 7 primary delusions must collapse before genuine insight emerges. First dies satisfaction's permanence, that achievement brings lasting contentment. Second crumbles belief in free will. You observe thoughts arising unbidden, desires emerging without consultation, choices predetermined by character and circumstance. Third, dissolves substantial selfhood, the sense of being solid, continuous entity. Fourth collapses meaning's apparent self-evidence. Your career, relationships, pursuits lose their assumed significance. Fifth, romantic love unveils itself as nature's reproductive strategy, personal preference as species' biological imperative. The overwhelming intensity demonstrates will's power to override reason completely. Sixth, social hierarchies appear arbitrary conventional distinctions between success and failure, recognized as phenomenal arrangements rather than essential facts. Seventh and most dangerous, existence itself reveals no inherent purpose. The cosmic drama unfolds without author, without goal, without justification beyond its own blind perpetuation. These illusions typically dissolve in sequence. Recognizing which has crumbled and which remain intact provides crucial navigation through awakening's dangerous passages. False awakenings proliferate. Psychological crisis masquerades as spiritual insight. Mental disturbance presents itself as enlightenment. I knew two men claiming spiritual awakening. The first announced himself enlightened and justified cruelty. Since all is illusion, my actions don't ultimately matter. The second, a simple craftsman, never claimed enlightenment, but exhibited unmistakable signs. Competent work, genuine kindness toward all creatures, reluctant speech about his insights. Apply these criteria ruthlessly. First, functionality persists. Genuine awakening brings suffering, but not dysfunction. If spiritual insights prevent managing basic tasks, you experience psychological crisis requiring medical intervention. Second, compassion increases. True awakening deepens kindness despite clearer perception of human folly. If supposed enlightenment produces contempt or cruelty, it is counterfeit. Third, insights remain true independent of preferences. If realizations consistently flatter your ego or exempt you from suffering's universality, they serve self-deception. Fourth, reluctance characterizes genuine recognition. Those experiencing authentic awakening speak unwillingly, aware it sounds grandiose. Apply these tests to your own experiences. Honest assessment prevents wasting years pursuing false paths or causing harm through supposed spiritual insights, actually serving selfishness. The will is not psychological faculty of choice, not conscious intention. The will is metaphysical essence, underlying all existence, blind, unconscious, aimless, striving without purpose. Every action, thought, desire is this will manifesting through your form. The hunger driving you to eat, ambition driving achievement, attraction driving romance, all are the same force using consciousness for its purposeless perpetuation. For years I puzzled over continuing behaviors. I knew futile pursuing women who brought temporary satisfaction, seeking recognition I consciously scorned. Then understanding struck. These were not my choices, but will expressing itself through the form called Arthur. Observe honestly. Does hunger arise from conscious decision or appear unbidden? When sexual attraction overwhelms, who chooses? When ambition consumes you, where is autonomy? The will operates through graduated manifestations. Gravity in stones, vegetative force in plants, instinct in animals, consciousness in humans. We possess awareness enough to perceive will's nature, but insufficient freedom to escape it. This explains our unique torment. Recognition does not grant control. You cannot resist will through willpower that would be will opposing itself. But observation begins loosening identification. When hunger arises, note, this is will, expressing as appetite. This subtle shift initiates transformation. The will operates through disguises, consciousness, mistakes for authentic preferences. Herr Müller, a Frankfurt merchant, achieved wealth, position, fine home, yet each accomplishment brought momentary satisfaction before generating new wants. The strange thing, he confessed, is I never wanted these specific things until I acquired the previous ones. This is not personal failing, but will's essential nature, endless striving that cannot be satisfied. Recognize will's primary masks. Sexual attraction presents itself as personal preference, but examination reveals precise patterns serving species reproduction. Social ambition appears as individual aspiration, but serves hierarchical dominance, instinct. Acquisitive drive seems like prudent security-seeking, but reveals blind compulsion. Restless comparison prevents satisfaction. Your achievement means nothing if another achieved more. Fear of death is will to live's most fundamental expression. You do not fear non-existence, but cessation of this particular willing. Yet death merely returns will to undifferentiated state for renewed manifestation. When strong desire arises, pause before acting. Ask, which mask is will wearing? What would it accomplish through this action? This observation, maintained consistently, begins revealing the machinery of enslavement. The world as you perceive it, with separate objects, causal relationships, spatial locations, temporal sequence is not reality itself, but reality filtered through consciousness's necessary structures. Space, time, and causality are forms of representation, not features of the thing in itself. The actual world, the will, knows no separation, no before and after, no cause and effect. What you call separate beings are temporary manifestations of one universal will. During an evening walk along the Rhine, watching the river flow, perception shifted. The river and bank and I, who observes, reveal themselves as artificial divisions consciousness imposes on undifferentiated will. The separation existed not in reality, but in representation. The principium individuationis, the principle making beings appear separate, is the grandest illusion. When you harm another, you harm yourself. When another suffers, you suffer. Not as moral prescription, but metaphysical fact. The Hindus recognized this millennia before Western philosophy. They named the phenomenal world Maya, the veil obscuring reality. Not that material objects are hallucinations, but their apparent independence and separation are illusions. In moments of aesthetic contemplation absorbed in music, sublime landscape, the principium individuationis temporarily dissolves. Subject and object merge. These moments reveal reality's essential unity and provide experiential confirmation of philosophy's claims. The first dangerous passage occurs when you viscerally recognize that satisfaction is impossible. Not difficult, impossible. Desire is by nature endless striving. Every achieved desire spawns new desires. Every satisfaction is merely temporary cessation of discomfort. A young scholar, upon grasping this truth, attempted to simply stop desiring. He refused social engagement, spurned romance, lived as ascetic. Within months, he descended into profound depression. His era, attempting to force transcendence before consciousness developed capacity for it. You cannot eliminate desire through decision, but you can observe desire's operation consciously rather than being swept away. Select one recurring desire, hunger, or ambition. For several days, observe the complete cycle without acting immediately. Notice, does desire arise from choice or appear unbidden? How long does satisfaction last? When does new restlessness emerge? The torment of this stage, watching yourself pursue what consciousness knows is futile. Your hand reaches for wine while awareness observes. This is temporary cessation of discomfort, not genuine satisfaction. Do not attempt to force yourself to stop desiring. The goal is observation, not elimination. Understanding desire's nature allows relationship to it to transform gradually. This progression requires months or years. Patient practice produces what force cannot achieve. The second dangerous passage occurs when individual identity begins dissolving in lived experience, not merely intellectual understanding. In my 40s, looking at my reflection while shaving, I suddenly could not recognize the face as mine. It was merely a face, no more me than any other. The experience lasted only minutes, but revealed viscerally. The self called Arthur was temporary phenomenal appearance, not substantial entity. As awakening deepens, personal memories feel increasingly like events that happened to someone else. Relationships lose their special significance. The difference between self and other becomes less obvious. This is not amnesia or psychological disorder, provided functionality remains intact. Can you still perform necessary tasks competently? If yes, this is spiritual awakening rather than psychological crisis. If ego dissolution prevents basic life management, seek medical intervention immediately. Some misuse this recognition as excuse for cruelty. If self is illusion, my actions don't ultimately matter. This is sophisticated evasion. Ethical behavior becomes more important as you perceive underlying unity. Harming another is literally harming the same consciousness manifesting through different forms. Spend time reviewing old photographs. As you observe past you, notice your relationship to those experiences. Most discover that self is constructed narrative rather than substantial entity memories, connected by storytelling rather than essential continuity. The third and most dangerous passage. You clearly perceive that all action, even spiritual practice, is will perpetuating itself, yet you remain incapable of genuine resignation. You see futility but cannot stop participating. My Sanskrit colleague reached this pit after immersing too rapidly in Eastern philosophy. He saw clearly that all his actions served only blind will's perpetuation, yet he continued acting, which he experienced as unbearable hypocrisy. Unable to achieve resignation and unable to bear participation, he chose what seemed the only alternative, refusal of existence itself. Suicide eliminates particular manifestation, but not will itself, which simply returns to undifferentiated state for renewed appearance. The Hindu understanding of reincarnation captures this truth. Genuine resignation is not violent rejection, but quiet transcendence of attachment. You continue performing necessary actions, eating, working, interacting, but without inner attachment that transforms action into suffering. Think, the form called me performs these actions, but I am not ultimately this form. For 1 week, perform all necessary actions while adding silent observation. This is will acting through this form. Do not alter behavior, simply add observation. This practice creates the split awareness necessary for navigation. By week's end, most report actions feel less personally invested, though functionality remains intact. Crossing this pit requires patient persistence, not dramatic rupture. Aesthetic contemplation provides the most accessible entry into will-less perception. When genuinely absorbed in great music, visual beauty, or sublime nature, the usual subject-object division temporarily dissolves. During my Dresden years, absorbed completely in Mozart at the opera, profound shift occurred. The usual sense of I, Arthur, listening to music dissolved. There was only the music itself. And somehow I was it. The experience lasted perhaps 10 minutes, but remained more memorable than years of ordinary consciousness. This is what the Upanishads mean by transcending Maya, what mystics call union with the divine. It is consciousness without willing, perception without grasping. Music is supreme among arts because it most directly manifests will itself. It doesn't represent emotions, but is them. Therefore, musical absorption provides most direct access to will's essential nature without conceptual mediation. Identify art forms or natural settings facilitating your absorption. Schedule regular exposure, not as entertainment, but as practice. When engaged, notice the moment absorption becomes complete. When separate self-observing dissolves into participation, select one piece of music, artwork, or natural setting. Spend 20 minutes in focused engagement. Set intention, not to analyze, but simply perceive. Most find genuine absorption. Difficult initially, mind constantly wanders. Commentary intrudes. But with practice, moments of genuine will-less perception begin occurring. The capacity developed here generalizes to other life domains. Genuine compassion arises not from moral commandments, but from metaphysical perception. When you truly see through the principium individuationis, when you recognize that another's suffering is your own suffering experienced through different phenomenal form, cruelty becomes impossible. I once encountered a beggar on Frankfurt streets, obviously suffering. My usual response, giving coin while maintaining emotional distance, felt suddenly impossible. For a moment, the principium individuationis dissolved. The suffering I perceived was not his suffering as distinct from mine, but the same suffering experienced through different temporal forms. This explains why spiritually advanced individuals naturally behave ethically without moral struggle. Not because they're exceptionally virtuous, but because perceived unity makes cruelty impossible. You cannot deliberately harm what you recognize as yourself. Morality based on commandments requires constant willpower to override selfish impulses. But compassion arising from perceived unity requires no willpower. It emerges naturally from recognition. Treatment of animals provides powerful test of genuine perception. The person who recognizes unity sees animal suffering as their own suffering. When encountering any being in suffering, pause before responding. Attempt to perceive underlying unity. This is not separate being, but temporary manifestation of the same will. Notice how this perception affects your response. Practice this especially with beings you normally dismiss. The spiritually advanced individual continues functioning in the world, but without inner attachment that transforms action into suffering. Herr Schmidt, the Frankfurt merchant, exemplified this principle. He conducted business with competence and shrewdness, yet spoke of transactions with amused detachment. When a profitable deal collapsed, he remarked, "How interesting circumstances arranged themselves differently than expected. No despair, no rage, merely observation." The sage is not emotionless automaton. Emotions continue arising, but relationship to emotions transforms. Rather than being swept away, one observes their arising and passing like weather patterns. This allows appropriate response without emotional overwhelm. The key distinction: action arising from attachment versus action arising from appropriate response to circumstances. The resigned person eats when hungry but without desperate grasping, pursues goals when necessary but without belief that achievement brings lasting satisfaction. Like actor who performs role excellently while knowing its performance, the sage functions appropriately in social roles without confusing role with essential identity. Choose one recurring situation producing emotional reactivity. For 2 weeks, practice responding with engaged detachment. Continue responding appropriately. Don't become passive, but observe your response rather than being swept away. Most discover effectiveness often improves while suffering decreases dramatically. The transformation is internal, not external. How can will deny itself when consciousness itself is will's manifestation? Just as certain chemical reactions are self-terminating, the will in its highest objectification, human reflective consciousness, can develop capacity to recognize and deny itself. In my 70th year, after decades of cultivation, I experienced several days where desire's grip weakened dramatically. Food satisfied genuine hunger without spawning new cravings. Achievements registered without pride or disappointment. Even pain from declining health occurred without usual mental resistance. This was not permanent state. Within weeks, ordinary consciousness gradually returned. But it revealed that complete denial of will is actual possibility, not merely theoretical concept. You cannot directly pursue will's denial. Such pursuit would be will-driven. Instead, continue established practices: aesthetic contemplation, unity perception, engaged detachment. Over months and years, these gradually weaken will's grip. Watch for subtle signs of progress. Do desires arise with less intensity? Does their non-satisfaction produce less suffering? Can you observe thoughts and emotions without complete identification? When temporary experiences of profound willless perception occur, don't grasp at them or attempt perpetuation. Simply note that consciousness possesses this capacity. Most practitioners experience only glimpses, moments of genuine will-less perception surrounded by ordinary consciousness. Claiming permanent transcendence typically indicates spiritual ego rather than authentic realization. All genuine ethics reduces to single foundation: recognition that another's suffering is your own suffering experienced through different phenomenal form. This is not metaphor, but metaphysical fact. During the 1848 uprisings in Frankfurt, I witnessed revolutionaries and soldiers treating each other with spectacular cruelty. But I also observed one moment of profound compassion. A soldier, about to fire on wounded revolutionary, suddenly saw in the man's terrified face his own brother's features. the gun lowered. For just a moment, the distinction between enemy and brother dissolved. I saw only suffering that was somehow my own. When you genuinely perceive that apparent individuals are temporary manifestations of one, will harming another is literally harming yourself. Divine commandment requires belief in mythology. Social contract requires enforcement. Utilitarianism requires impossible calculations. Only compassion arising from perceived unity is self-enforcing. Your treatment of creatures incapable of reciprocating reveals whether unity perception is genuine. The person who eats meat while claiming to perceive unity has not genuinely perceived it. Whenever making decisions affecting another being, attempt unity perception. This is not separate entity, but temporary manifestation of the same will. Notice how this affects your decision. Ethical behavior becomes more consistent as recognition deepens. The person becoming more consistently compassionate is genuinely advancing toward resignation. The spiritually awakened individual, having navigated dangerous passages, cultivated will-less perception, recognized unity lives in the world but not of it. They function appropriately in all circumstances while maintaining awareness that representations are not ultimate reality. I observe Herr Schmidt now in his final years. He continues business but speaks of it as theatrical performance he neither wrote nor believes in, yet performs competently because the role exists. When his wife died, he arranged the funeral appropriately but without theatrical. Grief. When praised or criticized, he receives both with identical equanimity. The shift is primarily internal. The sage may continue similar activities but relates to them differently, participating without complete belief, functioning without desperate attachment, pursuing goals without expectation that achievement brings lasting satisfaction. Even awakened individuals experience desire, pain, aversion will continue operating through their form. But relationship to these experiences transforms. Rather than being swept away or struggling against them, the sage observes their arising and passing with equanimity. Use Herr Schmidt as template for assessment. Am I functioning competently while maintaining awareness of representation's nature? Do I treat all beings with consistent compassion? When circumstances change, do I respond appropriately without being overwhelmed? Don't expect perfection. Even advanced practitioners have moments where will's grip returns, where attachment resurfaces. Progress shows an increasing frequency and duration of genuine recognition, not permanent perfect state. The spiritually awakened life is not destination reached, but direction traveled, not state achieved, but practice maintained. The journey itself, gradual deepening of understanding, moments of genuine recognition, increasing capacity for compassion is valuable regardless of whether complete enlightenment is achieved.